Welcome to More Action, the podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals. I'm your host, Shelly Bryan, and together we have candid conversations with industry leaders to uncover valuable wisdom and lessons learned. My hope is you use these lessons to intentionally take more action in business and life. I hope you share and enjoy. So excited to have our guest for today on the show. You know, one thing about the show, you can tell by the name, it's all about more action. And Dr. Roni Prucz is one of those people that I like. This conversation will be so great because while he is a plastic surgeon, we are going to talk about a lot of different things and maybe things that you haven't even thought about before. And so, Dr. Prucz, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know, and right after a surgery, right? Like nothing like packing in your day, having a surgery, jumping on a podcast.
Yeah, today's been a pretty busy day. But sorry I was late, and I appreciate you accommodating me.
No, this is wonderful. So if you would, because I know that this is something specifically with plastic surgery about board certified and what that means. Can you share a little bit more about this? Because this is something that whether you are in the medical profession or not, you're human and you are probably getting medical attention in some way, and you have to be your biggest advocate. And so educating yourself is one of the best things that you can do, and understanding the differences, whether it comes to mid-level practitioners like a physician assistant or nurse practitioner and or MD versus DO. But I would love you sharing exactly what that means from your perspective, because it is a huge difference.
No, absolutely. So, a lot of my practice is actually patients coming to me for second opinions or coming to me after they have a surgery that didn't go right with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And one of the first questions I ask them, I say, hey, was your surgeon board certified? And a lot of them don't even know what that means, which always is surprising to me because I feel like people, I do a ton of research, so I always think that other people do. And I guess I'm sort of an anomaly in that way. Because a lot of people spend more time like researching their new iPhone than they do their surgeon, which just it's mind boggling to me, but it does happen. So board certification for a plastic surgeon, there's only one board that's recognized, and that's the American Board of Plastic Surgery. So in order to be a board certified surgeon by the American Board of Plastic Surgery, you have to complete an accredited residency or fellowship, which can be anywhere from 6 to 8 years. You have to do an written exam, which I think is 400 questions. It's been a little bit since I've taken it. And then you have to do an oral exam, which is actually here in Phoenix. So all the plastic surgeons in the country come here to Phoenix. And for 2 days, we're just grilled by other surgeons, and we have to do an oral exam. And only after you pass those 3 steps are you a board certified plastic surgeon by the American Board of Plastic Surgery. Now, out there, you're going to see all sorts of different certifications. You're going to see people say, I'm a cosmetic board certified surgeon, or I'm a facial cosmetic surgeon. That doesn't carry a ton of weight because there's so many different boards that some of those accreditations are given to you in maybe even in a weekend or in a weekend course. Some of them may just be an unaccredited fellowship that maybe you did for a year or less. So there's such variability that those terms don't carry a lot of weight, in my opinion, because they're not recognized by the American Board of Medical Specialties, which is what recognizes the American Board of Plastic Surgery. So that's a super important question. The easiest thing to do if you're a patient, you're not sure, you just go to the American Board of Plastic Surgery website and you type in your surgeon's name. And if you pop up, then they're certified by the American Board. And if they don't pop up, make sure you spell the name right. And then if they don't pop up, but if they spell the name right and they're still not popping up, that's someone that I would probably not go see.
You know, and I think just like what you said there, it just puts it in perspective. More people spend time researching like the next iPhone or the next app or the next like piece of tech that we're going to get. When it's like medical, we just think, oh, it says MD, like we're good, they're a doctor. And there are so many different levels.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest things to me, actually. So, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but, so I at Duke University, so I had 2 degrees from Duke with a biomedical engineering degree and electrical engineering degree. And that was the #1 program in the country. And then I went to Johns Hopkins for medical school, which is the #1 medical school in the country. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the University of Washington, which is one of the best plastic surgery training programs in the country. So anyways, I say all that because I have patients come in to see me in my office and we start chatting and I'm like, oh, so like, why did you pick me? And I expect them to be like, oh, you went to Johns Hopkins, or, oh, you have 2 engineering degrees. They just say, no, you were the closest surgeon to my house. And that always just blows my mind. I'm like, okay, I do all this work to go to all these great places And, the thing that's bringing me patients is my proximity to their home. So, I definitely think, and it's hard. I get it. For most people, those names may not ring a bell. If you're not in the medical world, you may not realize that those are, that means something. So I understand that part of it, but it's just amazing to me that that doesn't really play into a lot of people's decision making. And it's really just a matter of convenience, which is important. I'm not going to discount it, because being close to your surgeon's office, if there's something that you need, is convenience. And I totally get that. But there is, there are certain steps that I wish people took, which is, check out their training, make sure they're certified by the American Board of Plastic Surgery, ask around, don't just look at Google. A lot of the reviews, online, I always tell people, my patients especially, I say, don't look at my good reviews. I say, go look at my bad ones, because the good ones, who knows where those are, all of ours are real, but there's a lot of ways that you can make those not real, that you can incentivize patients. We never do any of that stuff. So everything you see for us is real. But if you go look at my bad ones are all like, I waited too long, or the office staff was not very, was a little bit mean to me that day, and those things I can take, those are things that we process, improve, and we go from there. And then sometimes I look up other surgeons and they have, thousands of 5-star reviews, but then I go look at the negative ones, and it's real stuff, things that went wrong in an operating room, things that went wrong in a clinic. And that's why I always tell patients, look at those, because for someone to go and put that story up there, usually they have to have a reason to do it. So those are, I think sometimes even more important than all the 5-star reviews somebody may have.
But I mean, I think that's great, just advice, even as a business owner. I mean, as a business owner, there's two things there that you said, like where you place your brick and mortar can have a significant impact on the overall business that you have coming into the office. And then also like the reviews. I mean, when we're researching like a new vacation and I'm looking at whether it's a resort or like a VRBO or something like that, I don't look at the like how many great reviews. I always look at the bad. Like what did they hate and the most recent? Like what happened? You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, the screen door was broken and it was annoying. I'm like, give me a break. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's a
They'll fix
VRBO.
it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This is not a big deal. But if they're like, air conditioning broke and they wouldn't come, I'm like, I'm out, So I think it is just good. Like the same skills that we use daily in our lives, like we have to apply that to our health. And while you are focused in reconstructive and plastic surgery, I think anything. And those that have been tuning into the show know that I have a really unique background. I don't even know if you know this, Dr. Prucz, but I'm blind in my left eye. And so I am incredibly passionate about finding the best doctor because it makes a difference. And the title, I'm gonna kind of like, just because like the Duke and John Hopkins, like great. Even big names sometimes screw up. Like
yeah, that's true.
Large, beautiful clinics that we have here in Arizona screw up. So I think it really comes down to the person, and being able to connect with them is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think you touched on an important point there. Complications happen. They happen to everybody. So, any surgeon that pretends they have a perfect track record, they're probably misleading you. Everyone has complications because surgery can be unpredictable. You could do the perfect surgery and you still may not have the perfect result. So, I think that's really important. That's something else I tell people, as surgeons, how do they manage their complications? Like when I have a complication, my wife can attest to this, like it keeps me up. I think about it all the time. We're constantly checking in on those patients. I tell my patients they can come in every day. Like literally, I tell my patients if there's an issue, you can come in every day and see myself or a member of the staff until you feel comfortable in making sure that we are getting you back to where you need to be, because that's really important. And there are surgeons out there that they'll blame the patient. They'll say, well, you did this or you did that. And sometimes the patient did do it. I've had some things where the patient was smoking after surgery, for example, or things like that. But for the most part, it doesn't matter, right? At that point, you just got to address the problem. You got to regroup the team and just kind of move forward. And that's something that I think is really important. And again, we have patients who come see us every day if they need to, and we're happy to do it because I don't want anyone to ever feel like we're like not there for them, because that's really important.
Well, and that just leads into the reviews, right? Again, it's like a business thing. Like if you're going to provide excellent customer service, then they're going to take the time to actually leave a good review. If you aren't, they're going to take the time to leave a bad review. So I think it's super important. But, one thing I wanted to actually just ask you about, based upon what you shared, going to Duke, all of the time and financial investment that you made into your education, and then finding that a lot of your patients come, not all, but as you shared, a lot of them come because of proximity to you. So I guess the question would be, is like, what are your thoughts now being out in practice, out in the world, many years, highly successful? Do you think you would still be in the same position if you didn't have Duke?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question, actually. So I think it's a little different for the medical training. So, I think there's two things I'd say to that, or maybe three actually. I think the schools that you attend are somewhat of a reflection of your overall work ethic and maybe your capability. So, when you're going to these high level schools, I was lucky. I was like the boy wonder from West Virginia. Like I think that if I had been in a normal high school here in Arizona, I would have been just any other kid. But coming out of West Virginia, I never got a B in my life, and I had a really high SAT score. So I think these schools looked at me a little different because that was something unique, for them to pull this kid from West Virginia. So I give a lot of testament to that. I think to do that, and then it sort of puts you in a situation where now you're not the smartest kid anymore. So I think being at those institutions, I think made me a better person because one of my best friends from medical school. I mean, the kid was a genius. Like he never studied. And the night before, he would just read the handouts, never came to class, would read the handouts, and he would get, B's or A's on the test. Whereas I was the opposite. I was studying constantly, in the library or wherever, trying to remember the things I had to remember. So I think that's part of it. And then when it comes to the medical training, I think that is really important because the level of breadth of education and training that I got between Hopkins and the University of Washington, I mean, it's hard, you're hard pressed to find a more broad and diverse education because I was with the best of the best and learning from them, taking their techniques, and then doing the wide variety of things that we did. We weren't a program where we just did breast all day or we just did face all day. We did everything all day. And I think that was really, and I think that's one of the reasons I've been successful out here is because I can do a lot of things and I can help a lot of people and a lot of other surgeons. I mean, that's really sort of how my cosmetic practice took off was, I made a name for myself helping other surgeons, and then they would start sending me their family members or their patients for cosmetic procedures. And I think that was a natural transition. But you touched on something really important, and I think the world is changing. For example, my kids, like I always joke with my friends, I don't really care if my kid goes to college, to be honest, at this point, because I see a future that's very different than our future, than our past. I think if I can make him a little programmer, a little hacker, if he's like a 16-year-old who can bust into the FBI database, Google's going to hire him, right? They're not going to care if he went to some school because he is able to do the things that they need him to do. So I think this is just my thought, but I think the world is just moving more to what can you do, not where were you educated? Whereas I think when we were coming up, that was a bigger part of it. Like a lot of people did look at our schools and, decided kind of what the next step of our career would be based on where we were. Whereas I think, this new generation, I don't know if that's true anymore. I think that, if you show aptitude and a certain skill set, they're not going to care where you went to school or if you even did go to school, because it's just not relevant to what they're trying to have you do for their company.
I could not agree more. We definitely share that feeling and have had this conversation with our two kids numerous times because I actually went to college. I went to ASU, go Devils. I'm not going to say much more about that school, but my husband did not. He went to aeronautical. He went to Embry-Riddle, so he was in flight school for a while, but then pulled out. And we are. You can't say one's more successful than others. You can't like do this anymore. And to your point, times have changed. And I think the education system is slow in its change to be able to keep up, to make it valuable for the investment and the time to do it. And I think one thing that I want to come back to that gets skipped over, but I have literally had this conversation twice, once with my son and then once with someone else, a colleague that I know just recently, is about getting uncomfortable. So you were this super smart, kid in West Virginia, right? You were the big fish in the pond, let's call it. And I loved your perspective of like, okay, you went to Duke and it's like, you were no different. Like, and in fact, you had to try harder than even one of your best, friends that you made at school. And I want to say, because this is a skill that I think that we need to train into everybody. And I know I am as a parent with my kids, is you want to be placed in those situations because it's like, how are you going to raise up if you get placed into those? Because I am sure, and you probably have stories that there were people that were just like you that came to that school and they were like, I'm not special anymore. I'm not unique. I'm not the big fish. Like I quit, I'm out and crumble. And that is like, you can learn everything. Anybody can learn anything, a new skill, 100%. But those behaviors to be able to stand up, have the confidence, realize, and almost desire to become the small fish in any pond, because that is where like the growth goes. I mean, I can imagine just that decision has changed the trajectory of your life and how you've been able to build such a great, thriving, successful practice here.
Yeah. So one of my favorite podcasts, including yours, but one of my other favorite podcasts is it's called, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's the All In podcast. And essentially it's a group of tech entrepreneurs who are just brilliant, brilliant individuals. And they talk about all sorts of different topics, including politics, taxes, tech. But one of the recent stories they told, and I might mess this up a little because it was several podcasts ago, but one of the recent stories they told was a tech CEO had gone to Stanford and he looked at the Stanford group and obviously a bunch of very, very smart kids. And he said, I'm not looking for someone who's smart. He's like, I'm looking for someone who's resilient. And he said, the way that you build resiliency is you have to suffer. And he's like, I want you kids to suffer. And he said it in a way that, kind of, I think was a little jarring for them. He's like, I want you to suffer because when you suffer, suffering builds resiliency and resiliency builds character. And what I'm looking for from you guys is character. I'm not looking for smart. For smart, I can find. But someone who's smart and has good character and resiliency, that's what's going to make the next important addition to my company. And I think that's really true. I mean, we went through a period now recently where we had a little bit of a turnover on our staff, and my office manager was suffering, and I was joking with her earlier. I said, like this is important because you got through this. We came out with a wonderful staff on the end of it. And now you know that you can do it. You suffered. You were resilient. It built your character. And now if this ever happened again, we know that we can push through one more time. So, to me, that's really important. Same with my kids. One of my lessons for my son is, every time he falls, I say, why do we fall? So, and I taught him to say this, but so he says, so I can get back up. I was like, that's exactly it. So, like parents, he plays soccer, and I think other parents probably think that we're like mean parents because when my kid falls, we don't go to him. Like we just let him sit there and cry. And I look at him, I say, get up, get up. If he was super hurt, as a doctor, I know when he's hurt and when he's not. And I think the other parents, I watch them and their kids fall and they run out to the kids and pick them up. And we're like the exact opposite. We're like, I just tell him to get up and he's 4 and he gets up, and I think that's really, really important.
Well, and it's I think leadership, and even in like you just shared in your organization, right? Like you have a lot of turnover that is really tough, and it's that could be a whole nother podcast in the medical industry with like
Absolutely.
staff. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
I have so
Staff is the
many.
hardest part of private practice. I'll tell you that, right?
I have so many friends, and even in the hospital situation, it is bad right now. But
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get a group that meshes and works well together, and it's hard to set expectations and to keep people on track and to have a unified vision and goal. That's not easy to do, and we're a small office too, so you get even one person that's a little bit off of that kind of pathway, and it can create ripples throughout the whole pond, if you will. And that's the hardest thing I've realized running a small business and I've talked to other small business owners. It's always the same thing. It's staff. It's, keeping your staff productive and happy is exceptionally difficult at times.
So as a leader of your organization, is you are the actions you take, right? And how you display them, not only in what you speak about them, but how you show them, you are changing the organizational culture, right? For good or bad. And so even like leading her through kind of this challenging spot, because like if you hadn't gone through all of that, I don't know that you could have be the leader right now. And so if you find yourself, I feel like, and it goes in different periods, let's say. So like when I was in corporate and leading a team, it's very different because it's really not it's not my values, right? It's not my beliefs, and working with HR and all these different legal things that we have to work with. When you have your own business, you get to make the rules. I mean, obviously within reason, you're not going wild off HR issues, but do you know what I mean? Like you get to like bring in the culture and the values and the people. And if you find those people that are willing to work and have that resiliency that you are talking about, you build such an incredible trust and loyalty to each other. It's not a one-way street.
No, 100%. And I think, one of the things, as you just pointed out, lead by example. And growing up, I had a lot of jobs. Like I was a dishwasher, I was a bartender, I was a bar back, I was a telemarketer.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah.
like I was a snow shoveler. Like I did all sorts of stuff growing up. So now, like even in our office, when there's something on the floor, I pick it up. When the phones are ringing, and this like blew my office manager's mind away. The phone was ringing and nobody was available, so I picked it up. I said, "Dr. Pruch's office," and this patient starts talking to me. Yeah, will you tell Dr. Pruch? And I'm like, "You're telling him right now," and they just start laughing, because they're like, nobody would understand, nobody would think that the surgeon would pick up the phone, but to me, it had to be done. You just got to do it. So and my wife, she does all of our social media, and she's always at the office, kind of cleaning things up or moving things around. And I think the staff members see that too. That like she's taking pride in the workspace. The office manager is taking pride in the workspace. I'm taking pride in the workspace. And hopefully over time, that, like you're saying, that sort of rubs off and builds a culture where everybody takes pride in the workspace, which is hard to teach, but hopefully people get it after time.
It's hard to teach, and it's hard, but it isn't, because I think what happens is when you do have turnover, it's you're kind of eliminating what didn't fit in. Do you know what I
You
mean? Like
reset. You get to
it
reset.
yeah, you have to reset. And as you level up, as you become better in your skills, become better as a leader, do different things, the people on your team might rise up with you, but they might not. And so either maybe they need to take a different seat, right, where they can stay in their safe little zone, but you start attracting the people that are really ready to take those risks to be able to move on.
Yeah, one of the things too, I think that I learned. So, the people that have been with us, we've had really great people. I mean, I can't think of anyone that I didn't think was a great, individual or person. But what I've also learned is how to manage these different personalities, because we've had people that were really great at what they did, but and I'll take fault. I didn't manage the personality correctly. Like I didn't know how to manage that person. And you learn. So like now, we have someone who's a similar personality to someone that we recently had, and you don't repeat the same mistakes, right? So we're like, okay, we need to let this person fly a little bit more than we let the last person, because you don't want to be too constricting on somebody who values their independence, or you don't want to give too much independence to someone who needs more structure, and those are kinds of things that you have to learn over time, the different personalities that you're going to encounter. And then if you pay attention, you start to see patterns. And as you see patterns, you start to do corrective actions to make sure that you're not repeating past mistakes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, you're 100% correct. But one thing I wanted to just touch base on, because I know that you come from a generation engineer.
Yeah.
Okay. So did anybody else go into healthcare, or are you the first
No,
healthcare?
that was like the rule in my house. So like they were all basically, I was going to go to school and I had to do engineering before I went to med school, but I always had planned to go to medical school. But that was sort of the crux of it. And it's so funny. Like we went out to dinner, we had a little family get together a couple weeks ago, and there was, I think, 6 of us there, and everyone was an engineer except for my wife. So and this was like my distant third cousin, and then my stepdad, and then my mom. So it was very telling of our family. That's just kind of how we've always been. It just keeps going back and back and back. It's probably more than 4 generations. I just don't have the history of it.
The history of it. Well, I would just love to hear, because when you hear engineer, I mean, it's like one way of thinking 100%, but then like going medical, and now you're a business owner, right? You just join like a big hospital group and do that. Like, how do you find, because I always find it's fascinating when we feel like we have this like perfectly planned out life, and it's like we have to, we do this, and then we go into left field, and then we take a sharp right, and we're like, holy cow, where am I now? And I don't know if you've ever felt this, but I know my career is anything but normal. And there were periods that I felt shame, because I was like, okay, here's all my training. Here's where I've just dedicated 18 years of my life. And now I'm going to go completely the opposite direction. And I had this like shame. Did you ever experience that when you were kind of going through different periods or
I
anything
don't
similar?
think, no, I wouldn't say shame, but the thing that I struggle with, I think the most is as an engineer, I'm very methodical. So I always knew in life, if I did A, I would get to B. If I did B, I got to C. And it worked, right? I got my A's, I got my good SAT score, I went to a good college. I did well in college, I did all my extracurriculars, I went to a great med school. I just kind of knew. And I think one of the things that I find most inspiring about other people is when they're entrepreneurs. Like I love entrepreneurs because I don't quite, and I know I'm a small business owner, but I don't quite have that dare to fail personality. the people that can go out there, just take a chance on themselves, not follow step A to B to C. They go from A to Z in this zigzag pattern, and somehow they come out on top. And I'm amazed by those people, because I don't have that. And, I think that's part of what makes my wife and I a good combination. She's a little bit more of that, but I'm very risk averse. Like, that's just not how I'm built. So even the fact that I held my own practice, I kind of fell into it a little bit more than I wasn't expecting to do it. I just kind of fell into it. And so I never felt shame, but I definitely, I wish I had a little bit more of that entrepreneurial spirit that I'm sure you have and that you've demonstrated, to kind of just take a leap of faith, because I've never been built that way. And, as a fourth generation engineer, that's not how we're built, right? Like, engineers, we don't take leaps of faith. Like, we calculate and we reassess and we measure. So, it's just not part of who I am, but it's definitely important in business, and I need to do a little bit more of it.
Well, but like, I mean, just to kind of come back at you a minute here, because like, while you're saying you don't have that, you absolutely have that skill now that you are running a private practice. And I think that even being risk adverse has a lot of benefits, because oftentimes entrepreneurs, it's like go and ask questions later, which I think there's a lot of merit to it, but sometimes it gets to a point where you're like, okay, I now have a lot of information. I have a lot of experience. Let me go through and actually make the, more calculated, more, specific decisions on what I want to do next. And I feel like you kind of have that, and you're learning kind of the riskier side a little bit as you go. So I think you do have some for sure.
I don't know. I mean, again, it's at some point you have to have fun with your life and your stuff. And, like, I'm big. So another thing I'm really into is finances. So I could talk all day. Like, we can make this financial podcast if you want. But,
Mhm.
one of the things is all my investments are boring. But they're not risky, right? But they generate consistent returns. So there's something I'm looking at now, which is I've kind of been offered this deal and potentially a restaurant down in Biltmore area. Which, if you talk to anybody, built restaurants are not great investments, right? They're super, super risky. But I'm sort of at the point now where I'm like, well, I want to have a little fun. Like, I think it would be fun to kind of be involved in something like that. Like, I think it'd be fun to go to a place where people know you and they know what kind of food you like, and the staff and they know you, and you can take friends, and I'm trying to kind of build to that, where I
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
something that's not in my environment or in my usual ecosphere.
Yeah.
So I'm trying, but it's not natural for me at all. I do have to definitely push the envelope to do stuff like that.
Now, I love that you are, though, because some people will go through life and never do it, And so the fact that you are, I think, is a big step. Now, I would love to hear kind of like, what do you think it is that has made you kind of want to just go have fun with the financial side of things? Try some different investments that aren't as, call like safe or just value based.
I think it's still the risk averse part of me, because I think we've reached a point of financial, like, security where I don't have to worry about my kids not being able to afford college, and that I'm not gonna have enough money to put on the table. Like, we were very conservative in our spending, and we don't have a lot. Don't get me wrong; we're not like sitting on like a buttload of money, but we have enough put away that even if I were not to work, my family should be okay, as long as they don't go and they don't blow it. So I think when I got to that point, and they talk about that financial independence.
Yeah.
And there's a movement in medicine. It's actually called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. So I'm only 41, so I'm not retiring anytime soon. And again, we don't. It's not like we have that large of a nest egg to do that. But I think part of me just sort of realized that now that we're financially independent, what's the point of all of it if you're not going to have fun with it? So try to take a few more trips, try to spend more time with your family, try to do something that is not maybe a good investment but a fun investment. And maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't, but it's not a large percentage of your portfolio, so you're able to kind of take that risk. And then I'm not going to say I had a midlife crisis because I'm only 41, but I have buddies buying Porsches, and I have a neighbor who's a good friend of mine, and he's got his Aston Martin. He had a McLaren, all these, buying these expensive things and doing these things that they do. And I'm not built that way. Like, I drive the same car, for years at a time. And, I'm not going to go buy the big fancy house. Like, that's just not who I am. So I think this is sort of me in my midlife crisis, maybe, being like, okay, I'm going to go do something fun with an investment. That's just sort of how it panned out.
I think it's interesting because I'm 44. And so I'm not that much older than you, but I feel like your 40s, you kind of get to this point and you have this like huge perspective change. And you're like, all right, what's really important here, right? Where are we set? How am I going to be? And like for me, one of my biggest goals is just making memories with my kids, giving them
Yes.
experiences, making memories with my kids. That's like number
100%.
one for me. And so everything we drive in our construction company with this podcast, everything is to go do that. I'm not either like, I don't know, all the fancy cars. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I have horses, so like that's a whole nother subject. But
But it's fun.
I
It's a fun thing.
it's a fun thing. And it's one of those things that like I think you to continue working because there's no way that you would retire anyway. I could tell the type of person that you are. You would be so
Yeah.
bored. You would be
I
so
can't turn
bored.
it off. I can't
No,
turn it.
and that's like my husband who will never turn it off. Chris will never turn it off, which is fine. Like that's not how we're wired. And but you do have to have fun. And once you get to that point, it's like you can't keep grinding and grinding and grinding without enjoying. And I think it's reflecting on like what is really important at this point. What will make me really happy? And if it is the Aston Martin, good for you. It doesn't have to be though, because social media says it is.
Yeah. No, 100%. We just went to Great Wolf Lodge this past Sunday, Monday, because I told my 2-year-old if he poo-pooed in the potty that we would take him to Great Wolf Lodge, and then like 10 minutes later he poo-pooed in the potty. So he and I had to make sure he wasn't tricking me because I have a 4-year-old. So I brought the 4-year-old in. I was like, "Is this you? Like, did you poop? And you're saying it's your brother, so you guys can go to Great Wolf?" And they were like, "No, it was him." And sure enough, he's been pooping in the potty ever since. So no, but I mean, yeah, something as simple as Great Wolf Lodge, and we had a great time. And it's just time where you can kind of disconnect. And I like water slides, and I like running around with the kids at the park. It's a fun thing to do, and you hit it on the head. The memories. And I think part of it too is having young kids, and I see them just growing up super quick, and I'm just like, oh man, like I don't want to miss this. Like like I don't want to. He's 4, and I can't even remember when he was 2. So like I don't want to have those kind of memories where I don't remember each of these stages. So yeah, you're 100% right about that. And even the restaurant thing, I think about that too. It's like I think it'd be fun, if it pans out, to take them, and the staff knows the kids too, and everyone
Mhm.
kind of gets along, and it's just a family friendly environment and just kind of fun.
Well, and I think, making investments. I was on a panel recently with a group of ladies about angel investing. And there was
Yeah,
a gal that she has a company that I had invested in. And we were just talking as I was sharing as the investee and or which way does it go? I forget. Investor.
you're an investor. Yeah,
I was the investor, and she was like, we were just talking about it, and I said to everybody in the room, I was like, the first thing is you got to take care of you. So like whether it's your business, your desires, what you need for your family is like always invest in you, and then you can look elsewhere. And that includes not only like things that we need, like shelter, clothes, food, all of that, but like your retirement, your education, like investing in you and then look elsewhere. And you've already done that. And so I think social media can put this like feeling out like, oh, we have to keep up. We have to do this. We have to do that. And it's like, no, you don't have to do any of that.
yeah. Social media is so funny to me because there's times where I'm like in the middle of something really special, and for whatever reason, I'm not fully engaged in it, and I'm not having, maybe I'm not having the most fun at it, even though it's a very, very special thing to be attending, or a very special moment. It should be a special moment, but my mind is somewhere else. And it's so funny because when I go back and I look at our social media posts, it looks like I'm just like having the time of my life. So there's definitely like it lacks genuineness, or ingenuous, I guess is the word I'm looking for. There's definitely a lack of authenticity. That's the word I'm looking for. Sometimes with that, because you can be in these situations where people post that they're having like the most fun in their lives, but you actually don't know how they're feeling at that particular moment. And I always find that to be interesting when I go back and I look at my own posts. I'm like, oh, I wasn't feeling the way it looks like I was feeling in that post.
Yeah.
But for the most part, um, yeah, it's just interesting. Social media has such a vast effect on how we interact, how we think, even the activities that we do. A lot of times, people being like, "Oh," and I think we talked about this briefly. Even patients, deciding to do plastic surgery. Like I
I
think
was going to
social
bring it
media,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think social media really pushes people, a little bit towards plastic surgery because you're constantly looking. Right now doing this podcast with you, I'm staring at my face. I'm staring at your face. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I don't really like that about myself. So it's definitely, there's been a trend in plastic surgery for sure. We see a lot of eyelid procedures. We see a lot of facelifts, a lot of rhinoplasties. I think because patients are always holding their phones and kind of looking at them during their Instagram posts. So I think that's it's good for me. It's a good thing, but it's definitely a interesting thing that, social media is affecting just such a variety of aspects of our lives, including the way we interact. I mean, again, back to the All In podcast. I don't mean to talk about other podcasts while I'm on your
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but they were
Sure.
talking about how a recent study was saying how the younger generation doesn't know how to do eye to eye contact. They're not comfortable with it. You can't sit down and have an eye to eye conversation with the younger generation because they're not used to it. They're used to talking through their devices. So, it's really going to change how we interact in the future with each other in
Well,
social settings.
and I think it's up to us. I think it's up to us as parents and even peers in business settings is like setting rules. Like oh my gosh, you were at Great Wolf Lodge. We were at Disneyland, right? It's crazy. We go every year. It's so much fun. But we sit and when we're in a meal, we never have our phone at the table. None of us. Our two kids, 12 and 14, my husband and I, no one. And you look around, every other family of 4 or 6 is down and looking at their phone. They're not even talking to each other or taking in everything that Disneyland, is hitting you with at every second. And I feel like you're 100%, I totally agree with you when it comes to how social media is going to change the way that we interact, but bringing it even back to I don't know if it was again on this other podcast that you mentioned, but the gentleman that was giving the talk and was saying like, I'm looking for resilience. Like think about this, like when kids coming out of school and or when you're hiring, if you don't look someone in the eye, you're not
Yeah.
going to trust them. You're not going to believe that they can do what they can do. They don't have the confidence. You're not like all of this. And we have to, I don't know what the answer is. Yeah, I know people are coming to
Well,
you for plastic surgery. I don't know if it's like, so they can't put their chin down. So they have to look up. I don't know.
I mean, again, and we talked about how the world is changing, but I think that the days of us talking directly to each other with eye to eye conversation is going away. A lot of it's going to be we're going to be viewing the world through devices, whether or not it's AI assisted goggles or we're interacting with people via podcasts and Zoom meetings. So it's not going to be a skill set that people are going to have. It's funny. You even go to like restaurants. I got kind of irked by this. I went to get a boba tea. And I love boba tea. So I'm at this boba tea place. I'm putting in my order because it's a screen, right? So I'm
Mhm.
putting in my order myself into this computer screen. And then it gets to the end and it says, what tip do I want to leave? And in my mind, I'm like, who am I tipping? Like, I just put in my own order. And then I'm like, am I tipping the person making the beverage? Which, sure, you could say you're tipping them, and I'm not going to get into the whole tipping argument. But to me, it was just like, where's the job and where's the customer service, right? So, like,
Mhm.
is the job to make the boba tea, or is the job not to, is the job not paying enough to make the boba tea that they then require supplementation for a tip? But then why is the customer who's not getting any customer service supplying that tip? And I was just kind of in this weird conundrum where I didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
There at the screen for a few minutes. I'm like, what's my move here? Um, you know, but it's just the world is going to be that way, and I see it even in the younger OR scrub techs. The nurse, the younger nurses, the younger scrub techs, they don't interact with the surgeons the way that the older people, the older generation might have. In terms of the way we communicate, the way we look at each other, the way that we acknowledge each other's presence. I had a scrub tech where I kept saying please and thank you with no response. It was the weirdest thing in the world. I literally kept saying please, thank you every time they handed me an instrument, and they never acknowledged either any one of those words. And it was very, very weird to me. And I was just had to remind myself this is a young kid, and this is the world now. Like there's just this social interaction is not the same that it was, and it's not going to ever be that way again.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think is like the future? And speak specifically, your
Yeah,
specialty
sure.
for like healthcare. I mean, is it going to get to the point of like your boba tea where it's like, I will take,
Yes.
this surgery, and then you just go in there and robots do it? Like what is going to happen here?
Yeah, so obviously this is my biased opinion, and as an engineer and as a tech guy, but I think that a lot of the knowledge specialties in medicine are gone. So I think
Mhm.
that you're not gonna walk in and see an infectious disease doctor or an emergency medicine doctor. You're gonna basically put in your symptoms. It's gonna run. Somebody's gonna come take your blood. I think that'll maybe one day be replaced by a robot as well, but they'll take your blood. The results will come back onto the computer. The computer will interpret those results. and they will be make a diagnosis of what you're going to do, and they'll give you the treatment plan. So I think that's definitely for the knowledge specialties. I think for the surgical specialties, I don't know. I think it'll be a really long time before patients let robots operate on them, but I think it's coming. I don't think that'll be in our generation or my lifetime, but there's still a lot in surgery that's not that doesn't follow a textbook, and it doesn't go the way that it should. And I think you need that kind of training and experience as a human to make those decisions. But eventually the tech will catch up. And then the question becomes, when the tech does catch up, will patients go for it? Will they let a robot operate on them? That might take a while. So, for me, like my cardiologist or my primary care doctor, if I had like a screen, I'd understand why they were doing that. But like if I was going to go see another surgeon for a procedure and they had like a robot there, I wouldn't have the robot operate on me.
It's funny that you say that. And I was like biting my tongue over here because you were like, I don't know if the patients are going to let a robot do it. Here's the real question. I don't know if patients will have the choice. That's the thing.
True. You're
It
100%.
is because, I mean, obviously with plastic and what you do, that's, I would say, not typically, I would imagine, run through insurance, especially on the plastic side, maybe the reconstructive, depending upon an accident or what have you. But medically, I don't know how much say we will have in the near future, because it's already happening.
You're right. And it's interesting, and it's not because we're not spending the healthcare dollars. I mean, obviously we spend more of our GDP than any other place in the country, but my personal opinion on that is that, we just have a very high level of administrative tape and a lot of I always tell patients, they're like, well, why is this so much? And I say, I don't have a skyscraper in the middle of every major US city, right? Like, I love how like these insurance companies, United, Cigna, Aetna, all these huge MetLife, like MetLife's one of the biggest buildings in New York, like I don't have a Prucz skyscraper. So, these are obviously for-profit businesses, and I think just like you're seeing in the restaurant industry where it's harder and harder to squeeze, to make things efficient and to pay the wages that people need to live, they're going to replace them with these machines. And I think you're 100% right. I mean, at some point, the insurance companies and the hospitals who are working together are going to start that squeezing on the physician side too, where patients won't have a choice because they're going to realize they can make more money by cutting out the person. And I think that's just kind of, unfortunately, it's just a matter of time and, kind of the direction things are going.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I will save this for maybe part 2 of our episode because like I am so against it because you can't replace, in my opinion, you cannot replace a robot with experience, period. And I would be totally blind if that was the case. And so I am a huge advocate for obviously having medical providers such as yourself, out there. And I think as patients, because you're a patient too, even though you're a doctor,
Yes.
like you've heard, he is
Yes.
a patient too. And so he is a lot of the battles that you probably fight with insurance for you and your family. Like we're all in this together, and we have to be the biggest advocates when it comes to our healthcare.
Well, and the system is just so confusing. I mean, even as a physician who understands the healthcare system in this country, I still struggle sometimes being like, when I get these explanation of benefits to try to understand my copay, my deductible, my max out of pocket. And I'm a relatively smart guy in the field. So, and like recently I had to get an MRI for something. It was ridiculous. Like the amount of hoops I had to jump through as a physician. I knew what I needed. I went, and I called, I told them what I needed. I got there. They still didn't have the order right, which if I had not been a doctor, it would have been the wrong MRI. So I'm standing there as a physician being like, this is wrong. I've already talked to you guys like for an hour about this. And then, I'm standing there and they're like, well, this is wrong. And I'm like, well, let me change it. I'm a doctor. Let me change my own MRI order to make sure it's correct. And they said, no, I can't do that. They're like, we need it to be the ordering prescriber. So again, thank goodness I'm a doctor. So the ordering provider is my friend at 7 p.m. at night. So I call up my buddy. I say, hey, dude, they need to hear it from you that this is the wrong order, and from their perspective, it was so dumb because I could have been calling my brother in Florida, or I could have been calling anybody, and just be like, hey, you're a doctor, say this, and
Yeah.
so the whole process was just didn't make any sense at all. But I came back from that and I told my wife, I was like, that was the worst experience ever trying to get an MRI, and I just can't imagine how patients who have none of that knowledge that I have get the test done. And to be honest, now I don't order very many more MRIs because I'm like, this is just too much work for the patient. Like, unless I really need it for something that I'm working up, I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Or I'm going to have my office staff kind of walk them through it to make sure that it gets done for them because it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And I mean, I appreciate you sharing that because you can feel, I'm sure everyone listening in, there's at some point in your medical history that you were like fighting. You're like, this is the most illogical thing. What am I doing? And it's like you hear it now from a doctor too, saying the same thing. But the end of the day, we have to be the biggest advocates for ourselves. And I think that even
100%.
comes to health, but one of my biggest takeaways from this is how you thrived when you became the small fish in the pond. And I think the more times that we can place ourselves, whether it's like learning about finances like you and what makes sense for you, or growing your entrepreneurial skills, growing your risk adverse skills, because those are good to have too, Dr. Prucz, is like become that small fish. And I don't know, I just find that that's where the real growth happens. And you are proof of that. And I love that.
Yeah, 100%. I just think, I'm constantly striving to learn, and I think everybody should be. If there's a project at the house, like I'm a YouTube warrior. So, if there's something I got to do at the house, I'll pull up YouTube and try to do it. And then sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I have to call a buddy to come kind of help me fix it. And I think that's really important to be able to expand your knowledge base and to be willing to try other things. And same thing I'm teaching my kids. Like my kids eat everything. Which is really cool for like a 4-year-old. Like we had an octopus recently at a place, and he was just downing it, and I was like, okay. And all the staff were like, "Man, he's eating octopus." I'm like, "Yeah," because I always tell him, just try it, just try it. If you don't like it, fine, but try it. And I think that's a really important lesson. So hopefully, he carries that over into wanting to learn, and he does. He loves watching YouTube and learning new videos because he sees me
Mhm.
doing it.
Yep.
It's amazing
Yep.
what the kids pick.
No, it is. And we're the example for them, like we talked about. Now, I've got one quick question for you before we close out, but I do have to call
Sure.
out your wife and the social media. If you're not following him, and we'll link everything in our show notes for you, but if there's anywhere else that everyone should follow you along, we'll have your Instagram handle. We'll put everything in there. It is awesome, crazy stuff, and really impressive and fun on social media. So, is there anywhere else that we can steer people to follow along with you?
I mean, our Instagram is pretty much our Instagram, our Facebook, and then our website. And those are going to be the places that are most up to date with what's going on. And yeah, so my wife is the social media director. So she's really, really, it was so funny because when we got married, she couldn't look at any of the bloody stuff. Like she just couldn't even see pictures of it. And now she's editing all these crazy videos. But our following is so interesting because we have all of our cosmetic followers, and then I have a lot of medical professionals following. So we try to cater to both groups, but both groups have very different interests in what they want to see. So it's funny because we post what's called a Freaky Friday, which is like a crazy reconstructive case. And every time I do that, I'm always afraid that I'm gonna freak out my cosmetic followers because they're not there for that. But every time I go to the hospital, the medical doctors and the other surgeons are like, dude, we love Freaky Friday. Like, when's your next Freaky Friday? So, I have to balance that though with like our last mommy makeover and our last facelift. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge. And then, the best thing about, or one of the great things about my wife being our social media director is I don't miss any of the moments. So, in terms of our personal lives. So in our story, we try to show, the personal side of things, that we're like a normal family and, just like everyone else, kind of just living day to day. And when your wife's your social media director, you can we just posted a great video of Great Wolf. You can do stuff like that. Whereas, if you're not constantly with your social media director, those personal moments get lost.
Well, I just love that. And just to call it out, you're not following like the typical doctor norms, right? So you say you're risk
Yeah.
adverse, but you're having a lot of fun over on social media and you can see it, and taking some risk over there. And like you got your Freaky Friday, you're keeping everybody around. It's good. It's good. Well, let me kind of ask you this last question, because I
Sure.
really appreciate your time. I know that you were incredibly busy, but the show is all about taking more action. We talked about a lot of different things, and I feel like we just scratched the surface on so many different topics that we could have even gone farther. But I would love for you
That
to
was the most, that was,
share. Go
I was
ahead.
going to just say that was the most non-plastic surgery interview for a plastic surgeon I think I've ever had. Everyone, but I love it. It's great to kind of get out of that because, I think you touched on it. Like we're diverse, right? Like I'm not just a plastic surgeon. Like I've got a lot of different things going on, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to kind of talk about these different things that are interesting. And if you ever want to do a more plastic surgery podcast, we can definitely do that, where we talk more about actual procedures and things like that. But no, that was a lot of fun. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. What was that
No,
last point you were
no,
making?
I love it because I think like, I worked with doctors for a long period of my career, and I always looked at them like the only difference between you and me is some education and school debt. That is the difference.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
that like it to take away from anything that any doctor has ever done, but I'm like, we're both humans. Like we're both people. We're both trying to, continue on in our lives and grow in the world. And so, I you are like most doctors that I know, a lot of the ones that I know, I will say some are just like attorneys or bad business owners. There's bad in everything. But the ones that are great, like they're just good humans. And I think that is the most important thing, that when you can connect with a doctor that way. So you're just connecting with another person. But I would love for you to share with us. I know that you're a researcher. I know that you want to understand how things work. But as you have been building your practice, right? You are an entrepreneur, you are a business owner. What is like one book? You've already mentioned a podcast, so you can't name another one. What is like one book
I'm sorry about
or
that. I'm sorry about
no,
that.
I don't care. I name podcasts. I share the podcasts I listen to. It's a useful tool for education, but
Yeah.
share with me like maybe one book that has been really impactful for you, a habit that you started, or like a product that you would recommend to people that are business owners like yourself that are wanting to continue to grow and stay being that small fish.
Yeah, I can't give you a book, but I can tell you one thing that I'm always doing. Anytime I hear a quote, something that I think that's inspirational, insightful, I write it down. And I do it for a number of reasons, and I go back through that list a lot because I think there's value in the knowledge that is out there, and kind of I think good quotes sort of give you those aha moments where you're sort of like, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, or that's kind of what I was feeling in that time. And I think that's really, really important. In terms of being like an entrepreneur, I think the most important thing is letting people do what they do best. So I'm not a salesperson. So I had to get someone who was good at talking about procedures and doing those things, because I don't want to be involved in sales. I'm a doctor, right? So I think it's important, and I'm a social media person. So you have to let people and build a team that complement your skill set. So I think the biggest thing for me is knowing what I'm good at and knowing what I'm not good at, and then the things that I'm not good at, finding people that are good at them, and then kind of combining those two entities into one place allows you to kind of grow, and to be successful.
That's awesome. Well, you got a 2-for-1 right there, right? Like I love the quotes and keeping that list going, and then just letting people fly, right? At the end of the day, if you get the right people in the right seats, it's a win. It's a win for everybody. So absolutely love that. Dr. Prucz, thank you so much for coming on
You're
today. This
welcome.
has
That was fun.
been
Thank you.
a lot of fun, and we'll definitely maybe have to have a round two. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry I did no plastic surgery on that plastic surgery question, with the plastic surgeon, but we'll do it one time.
we'll do it. We'll do it again. We'll do it again. All right.